You are watching Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury, and I am absolutely ecstatic about my guest for tonight. He's not only, could I call him a good friend, but most importantly, a doctor. Chris Nowinski will be joining us. He graduated from Harvard with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology. He played football, sorry about that, at Harvard, and I'm telling you what, I would love to have him on my right wing when I was playing, I'll tell you. And he has got so much. He's all Ivy. He was a defensive tackle. He graduated with a PhD in behavioral neuroscience from the Boston University. He is everything and more. And I want to say this before I get it. He's a very humble man. He has done so much. I've been able to meet him across the world in Germany, in New Zealand, and in Australia. And what I've always noticed about him, he's black and white. He tells you the way it is, and he will not be derailed by his thoughts, and he'll make sure you understand it. Very articulate and very clear in his messaging. And in my opinion, a man that will win, and take bets, he will win a Nobel Peace Prize for what he is doing for the world when it comes to concussions and CTE. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chris Nowinski.
Gouche, thanks for having me, buddy.
How are you, Dr. Chris? If you don't mind, I'd love to, not that I would ever disrespect you, well-deserved. If you don't mind me, can I call you Mr. Nowinski?
Just call me Chris. We go so far back, pre-PhD days, you know. Just call me buddy, just Canadian style.
Well, you certainly are a buddy, and I'll tell you what, it's blessed that I got to meet you. Obviously, back with the Keith Primo days, really quickly, Keith had donated his brain, and you talked to me, and I donated my brain, and then you've done such a great job. And so I think the people tonight will really want to know who Chris Nowinski is. Dr. Chris Nowinski, obviously starting from your education, you were a heck of a football player and then ended up obviously being a wrestler. Talk to us a little bit about the education part. Obviously football played a big role in that. And then of course, ending up as Chris Harvard, which was an amazing journey.
Yeah. So sports were my life growing up. Although originally my first love was science. I was just with my parents outside Chicago, and my mother was trying to get rid of all my stuff, and she found my gold medal from the Science Olympiad state championship from 8th grade. So science, then in sports. I was lucky to get recruited to play at Harvard with a great group of folks. Banged my head a few thousand times over those years, but got out okay. Love studying sociology because I always liked challenging what we thought we knew and why we know it and why we believe what we believe, which I think was a helpful perspective as we tried to start to say with concussions that things are a little different than what we've been told. And then got into healthcare consulting very briefly before I decided that was a little too boring. I still had some gas in the tank and joined the WWE. Had a great time traveling the world with some of the most interesting people you'll ever meet. But unfortunately, as much as we think of it as a entertainment and things as stunts, it's very dangerous. And I got unlucky on a few hits and had to retire due to post-concussion syndrome in 2003. And when I say I had to retire, I realized, I'd been getting concussions my whole career and never said anything, never realized it, never gave them the name. And that behavior of playing after every concussion really sort of damaged my brain permanently. I still have symptoms today, 18 years later, that linger from a 2003 concussion that I did not take time off of and wrestled for 5 more weeks until I developed a REM behavior disorder, sleep disorders, headaches, all these things. So that was where this passion came from, is that I really suffered for a long time. I still have some problems. And I realized that everything I thought I knew about banging my head was not true, and that we could do better.
And you've certainly done that over the years, and your passion and your dedication to it, and the good looks, of course, didn't hurt. When I met you, I was drawn to you, and a lot of people are. I've come to your galas. I've heard you speak around the world, and not only you're passionate, but I use the word articulate a lot in the simple sense that you can certainly explain it in layman's terms, so people that maybe didn't get a PhD can understand it. And I think that's what's so endearing to to you that you're able to present this injury, and of course, as it leads on to later life, possibly into CTE, you do it in such an artful way. And I think that's what's really important. And of course, being Chris Harvard in the WWE days certainly didn't hurt. You got notoriety not only through your football, but then on being a part of the Vince McMahon world doesn't hurt as far as marketing goes. Can you talk to us a little bit about that life after football, and now you're into WWE? I know you were in a contest, if I'm not mistaken, which was called Tough Enough, which you were one of the finalists.
Deep cuts.
You got it. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so when I decided I wanted to be a wrestler, what I did was I started going to Killer Kowalski's wrestling school outside Boston, nights and weekends. And it was 3 months into it, and all of a sudden WWE announces that they're partnering with MTV. This is the earliest days of reality television, to find the next superstar. And 13 people would live in a house and have, for 12 weeks and compete for a contract. And I wanted to pay my dues into the business like everyone had before me and just, travel the independence and learn the craft. But then I'm like, well, I'd be kind of an idiot not to at least send in a tape and see if they want me and take this other door. And so I did, and I was selected, and we had this horrible, traumatizing experience of being filmed for, 12 consecutive weeks, 24 hours a day. Because back then it was all like, they were surprising us every day. We never knew what was coming. It wasn't like it is today where you're sort of, it's a little more produced. And so they were just filming us and trying to make a storyline out of it, and ended up not winning. But that was the gift they gave me was, there were two Chris's on the show, so to differentiate us, they called me Chris Harvard, and the other guy was just Chris. And Chris Harvard, I didn't realize early on, meant I was permanently going to be a bad guy, because nobody feels sympathy for the guy they think has a silver spoon life, which was fine. And so I got to have a lot of fun insulting people and play this character that people love to hate. And it was a blast, but it also sort of gave me a peek behind the curtain of the way the world really works. Because we all, like, from the outside, there was a way I thought wrestling really was. And then when I got on the inside, I realized, wrestling's in a sense, derived from the carnival world of trying to understand, giving the audience what they want and help taking them on an emotional journey and all these insights that I could sort of appreciate in terms of using those powers for good and trying to educate people and trying to teach people like we do today.
Well, I'll tell you what, obviously you traveling and doing what you did, this has actually probably set you into that stage where you could do that. You're a very good public speaker. You do know how to certainly command an audience. I've been with you in Australia where you spoke. And I think what's really important is that sport had prepared you for this. Obviously, it didn't prepare you for concussions, but it's allowed you to understand what the cost of sport was. And so there is so much about Chris Nowinski that I know in 30 minutes we're not going to be able to capture. But what I do want to capture is the essence. You're a man that took on the challenge when obviously the Blair Benoit story, Andre Waters, there's so many names that you decided that you needed to pick it up and make sure people understood these people lost their lives, not over things that we thought it was about, but what you ended up having to challenge, not only the WWE, but also the NFL. Walk through us that. Obviously, you've been up against people like Vince McMahon, Roger Goodell, and I've watched some of the videos. I've watched some of your speeches. I've seen you in talking to Congress. What gave you that ability to stand up to some of the most powerful men in the world?
Wow, that's an interesting way to frame it. That's a very good insight from you to sort of realize that the wrestling training, what it did give me was, we were doing live television shows in front of 20,000 person audiences, millions of people watching at home, and I was literally, just running around in trunks and, high boots, fighting people so that sort of stress and doing live television sort of made the rest of life seem easier and simpler. And then when it came down to, speaking truth to power and taking people on and taking on the NFL, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I knew we were right. Like, I did my homework, I knew that the story that the public was getting told, specifically by the NFL and why I zeroed in on the NFL when I wrote Head Games in 2006, was not true, and that it was we were reliving big tobacco. And I grew up in a family where we just didn't tolerate that sort of thing. You don't abuse, you don't take advantage of people who aren't as smart as you. You don't take advantage of people who aren't as educated as you or as knowledgeable as you to make money, to line your pockets. And so it wasn't hard for me to just say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go fight this. I had daily headaches to remind me that I wasn't the only one suffering. We had the stories of people that were dying, like Andre Waters or Chris Benoit. And it just seemed like this was an unjust thing. And at that point, too, you have to remember, I had nothing to lose, right? Like I had no family. I got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old outside the door, which is why I'll be cut short. Like I had no family. I had no money. I had nothing they could take from me. I had no health. I was, so I wasn't sure how long I was going to live. And so, or if I would want to keep living with the pain I was in. So I just sort of went for it and said, look, I damaged my brain doing some reckless things. And if this is my journey, I'm going to sort of leave my mark and take a stab at trying to change something that's so easily changed, right? Like when you and I played, we would have, if we understood what we were doing ourselves, we would have taken time off after concussions. We would have practiced differently. We wouldn't have put our head in bad situations, but we were just not told, and that wasn't right. So I said, forget it. Let's go fight, because if that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is.
And you put up a good fight. Listen, Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury, we bring experts like yourself on to get rid of some of the myths and get some education and true education that we can really sink our teeth into. Of course, you're part of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. There was you're the founding member of it. I apologize, with some very good people. Of course, Dr. Robert Cantu and Dr. Ann McKee. You have Tim Fleischer up here, who I've met several times. Just a wonderful man. You were just on the phone with Dr. Michael Buckland back overseas. The network that you've built, obviously you've had some challenges. People would deny you the information that you were giving. They were starting to say, it's not true. And, you had a lot of naysayers, but you battled through that. And I think that does have something to do with the character of you playing not only football, playing in a team, because you're a very good team player, but also the fact that when you're playing in WWE, you understand part of it is not reality. There is, sorry if I'm breaking anybody's bubble. It is it's a little bit staged, but yet it prepared you to understand when you needed to be serious. Talk to us about that, because obviously the movie came out. It was called Concussions, and it had Will Smith in it playing Dr. Omulu. And then you had, I think it was Dr. Julian Bales, Alec Baldwin. They played it to a T. And it really depicted what was going on at that time. And you were a bigger part of that and understood it better. But that really started to open people's minds of what you guys were talking about. Explain to me how you felt. Did the movie do what it was supposed to do? And has it helped your journey in making sure people understand this injury much better?
I mean, I think what was good about that film is it treated this issue as a life or death issue, which it is. So there were some benefits to this. I mean, what's been driving the awareness, though, has not been sort of Hollywood. It's been the insight that we picked up early on, which was that we needed to build the science. Like we sort of had the insights back in 2007 when we started the foundation. In 2008, we started the Boston University CT Center and our collaborative brain bank. We knew that CT was out there. And we knew that, when the first 4 NFL players studied all had it, that wasn't right. This might actually be really out there in this population. Eventually, as you know, we found 110 of the first 111 NFL players we studied had it. We really just set up the long game, which was we'll fight over this in and out, up and down over the years, but we have to build that solid research infrastructure. And we have to outlast everybody. And we have to actually do the work to find out, not only to prove this exists, but really the long-term goal is, can we treat it, right? If you or I have this, can we take a pill in a few years that would stop it so we could keep what we have? right? So it's been that steady drumbeat of, just earlier this year in June, we released a report called 1,000 Reasons for Hope, because we crossed over 1,000 brains in the brain bank, 1,000 stories of people who died, of which 2/3 of them had CTE, and of which we developed all these insights, like the longer you play in a sport like American football, the more likely you are to develop CTE, the worse it's going to be. All these really important insights for changing the culture, right? It went from here's a few cases and we can debate the merits to here is a irrefutable database with statistical insights that you can't overlook. And now we can get to the business of reforming sports, of protecting children, of developing cures. So I think the game was, this isn't, we're not in this for a short period of time. We're in this for the long haul. This is a 50-year mission, and let's make all the steps we can do. So the call I was just on, you mentioned with Dr. Buckland, is we have a global brain bank collaboration now. We have partners in Canada and in Australia, New Zealand, and Brazil, and a couple more countries now online that were in that meeting that we'll be announcing soon. Like, basically, we're saying, can we recreate what we did in the United States everywhere? Can we get every country that's got contact sports and these cases working together? And even in this call, I'm thrilled that we made very positive steps towards having one master database that everybody shares so that we can work even faster.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Fired Up Network here. We're talking concussions. We're talking concussed, understanding the invisible injury with Dr. Chris Nowinski, one of the founders, along with Robert Cantu, of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Here's the logo I see on your shirt.
Sorry, before I forget, I will say that, when we're talking to the folks in Australia, let's not forget that you put up the money for those first two cases, first two brains to be studied in Australia. So thank you for that.
Well, I was honored, and thank God they weren't studying my brain first, because I would have been really, I kind of cracked that joke. I think they have Keith's. It's really that Keith was the driving force. And again, meeting you, Chris, again, I know you get a lot of accolades, and there's a lot of people, you've done so many things, but when you inspire, I'm inspired by you. I got to be honest. I follow you. I watch your moves. I try to emulate some of you. I'm not, of course, a doctor, but I'm in it for the right reasons, because when I had mine, I was alone. I didn't understand it. When I got through it as best as I could, I got back to North America. Then I had the opportunity to meet Keith, and then through him, I got to meet you. And it actually prompted us to write the book called Concussed. And you were in it. You were so gracious in helping us help us get along with that book so that we could get people to understand, as athletes, we didn't know. Suck it up, play through the pain, win at all costs. We didn't know what we were doing to our brains, and you enlightened us. Not you on your own. You have a phenomenal team and supporters, but it was that movement, because you could have turned away when you were challenged by many people and said, that's it. But because of that sport background, I knew you would not do that. And this is concussions and CTE. A lot of people get the misunderstanding that it's only about pro athletes and it's only about sports. As you have been so good, obviously, with our military, it's runs the gamut. It's kids falling off swing sets or down a set of steps. It's somebody getting into a car accident. Of course, the military, all different type of sports that we don't even think about. Talk to us about when you got started in this. Once I know that you changed the Concussion Legacy Foundation when you were going through the transformation. What's the change up until today?
Yeah. So, one of the important things is, since this is an educational forum, to talk about, as you sort of talked through all the exposures that we understand now, the one thing that's been solidified, and it was murky 15 years ago, and that we need to talk about, is the idea of what's the relationship between concussions and CTE, right? Because back 15 years ago when we talked about this, or 20 years ago, we were saying, hey, the more concussions you get, probably the more likely you are to get CTE. And now that we've done the work, and now that we've run the studies, we've realized that there's actually not a direct connection between concussions and CTE. The missing link is these repeated hits to the head that cause subclinical damage, meaning you can't feel it, right? You can't feel it. No test will show that things are happening, but on a microscopic level, you're causing inflammation, you're causing damage, you're causing axonal tearing that is starting a degenerative process in some cases that stays with you for the rest of your life. And so if you're watching this because you've had post-concussion syndrome like me or Gouche, But you haven't had thousands of hits to the head, like it was from a fall or an accident, or you're playing a non-contact sport. Like, you don't have to worry about getting CTE. Like, that's not going to be part of the game here. It's all about recovering from your concussion and feeling better. And then for those of you who banged your head too much, like we did, if it is the concussion that sparked your interest in this because you had the symptoms we had, the important thing is you can get better and you will get better from those things. And there's ways to do it. The Concussion Legacy Foundation has a helpline, which I encourage you to reach out to, and we can give you one-on-one referrals and mentors and education and things that'll help you, most importantly, hope, to remind you that just like Gouche and I felt alone and hopeless when we were hurt, you will get better, and we'll help you get there. But even if you do get better from CT, the mystery element here is if you've played too much sports, you've had too many thousands of hits to the head, even if you feel fine today, even if you never had a concussion, you might have this degenerative process building in your brain. And we think of it as a dementia-causing thing and an end-of-life thing, but the reality is the more we understand about the early places this disease shows up and the more we learn from related diseases, we're realizing that even early-stage CT can cause psychiatric symptoms, depression, anxiety, sleep disorders. So if this is happening to you, or if you have a history of thousands of hits and years of sports and some of these symptoms, it may be related. Odds are, hopefully it's not, and it's just random. But if it is, you can get treatment, you can feel better, and so that's really important.
I know that Jordan's going to pull up the website and also the hotline. I want to just change gears just a little bit. You're an author. You've written a couple of books, but the Head Games is the one that I had an opportunity to be close to. And when you're looking back and now realizing what you're doing, and you're no longer a pioneer, you were a pioneer. You're now a leader in this field, and still have challenges with people, questioning some of the things that we know. We've learned it firsthand. We've been there, and you mentioned about subconcussive hits. I wanted to ask you. I recall somebody said, "How many concussions did you have?" And we try and, okay, I know this one, I know, but I know I had 3 documented, and then when I was talking to Keith, he had 4 documented, and he'd say, I'm probably north of 12. Those hits where you have taken, and I would have taken, where you're kind of woozy and you see those little black spots go above, is that anything? Is that an indicator that you've done something to your brain?
Yeah, it is definitely an indicator you've done something to your brain. And, the threshold for what would you label a concussion is frankly subjective. So if you had 30 seconds of dizziness or stars, I would call that a concussion. If you had 5 seconds, maybe you could chalk it up to another mechanism that could cause some short-term symptoms. But the reality is, you're perceiving the world differently because your brain is functioning differently because your brain has been injured. And I think that's just, the way it is.
And that's why we're trying to tell people, listen, if you have those feelings, if you're playing or you've fallen down and you have them, take yourself back. Stop. You don't need to go back to the sport, because in those conditions, you're not going to be yourself anyways. And that's what we're trying to educate parents and coaches, administrators, and players about. And we'll talk about that in a few seconds before I let you go. Of course, the Team Up Speak Up. I did want to say you've been obviously in the New York Times. You've been on 60 Minutes. It was a great interview. Frontline. You've been on CNN. God, you're a rock star.
No, I've been on Gouche's show. That's the most important one.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very good. And we posted on the right-hand side. This will go out to several thousand people, and they will have the opportunity to look on the right-hand side and know how to get a hold of, obviously, the Concussion Legacy Foundation, the hotline. If you are in doubt, if you are suffering, please reach out to this hotline. It is absolutely amazing. But I wanted to talk about the sports. Obviously, you went from Sports Legacy Institute into the Concussion Legacy Foundation. The rebrand was allowing you to do these type things like you have now with a hotline. I've been to one of your galas, or I've been to 3 of your galas. I've been to one virtual. I know there's something coming up, and I will be there again. But I did want to give a little bit of the accolades because I think it's important. Hockey News listed Nowinski on its 2011 edition of the 100 most powerful people in ice hockey as one of the top 40 under the age of 40. It's got to make you feel good and very well deserved. What you did is you got several hockey athletes when we didn't think it was possible. And I know you've called me a couple times and you've explained it. What a difficult situation when obviously a player passes, you need to call a parent and ask them, would they be so kind to help your organization by donating the brain? I commend you that it can't be an easy call, Chris.
No, it's a call I don't like to make, but at the beginning it was sort of the only thing we knew, which was if you want to study a brain, you got to call somebody. We really got to get the brain within 48 hours someone's passing away. And that means you're basically calling them the day of or the day after they've lost a loved one. And I remember being so scared with my first call, which was to Andre Waters' family. And I'm forever thankful of how kind they were to me when I called and asked and said, hey, I think what happened to Andre might have something to do with all those hits to the head. And could we take a look? And when they said yes, because they wanted answers too, and it turned out, he had advanced disease, that changed everything for me. So I make those calls still weekly, sometimes daily. Luckily, though, we've shifted our strategy. We spent a lot of our time, like you, asking people to pledge their brain while they're alive to raise awareness of this, basically partially so that you'll be part of our research studies going forward for prospective studies and clinical studies, but partially because now families call us when they lose a loved one and we don't have to call them. They're already thinking. And in fact, we get almost 1 in 3 brains of NFL players who die each year now. And the families are mostly calling us. So we've set up a great system. Dr. Ann McKee leads the brain bank, and to go, study 200 brains a year just for our brain bank among 6 she runs, she's incredible. So
she is incredible.
It's all thanks to the families.
And I got to meet her at one of the galas after Keith and I had donated her brains, and she's such a wonderful lady. If I ever have to have my brain in somebody's hands, a great person to be. Vice called Nowinski the man most responsible for making CTE. I'm going to try and say the word. You're going to correct it. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
It's close. Encephalopathy. Come on, Gouche.
Thank you.
It's been a long time.
Well, it's that grade 12 education I got by passing grade 6 twice. Listen, part of the national, you've made it part of the national conversation. And in 2010, Sports Illustrated said, it is Nowinski's figure which looms behind the doctors and the headlines and the debate rolling over sports' newfound commitment to minimizing head trauma. I wanted to show this picture. Obviously, this guy was against you at the beginning, and I think you have certainly changed the eyes. Roger Goodell. Obviously, you challenge you being challenged by people, and now you feel, and I feel, you are certainly making inroads. People are now listening. It hasn't been easy. It's been a long road. If I could ask you, what do you feel the Concussion Legacy Foundation's successful moment is for you right now? If you could look back at all the things that you've done, what would you say, wow, we did this. We're not finished. We're not at the finish line, but I didn't think we would get here.
Well, I mean, I think what's most, the chapter that's sort of somewhat closing in my mind is that, we really spent that first decade focused on concussions and trying to get people to take them seriously. And I think when you look back now, whether it's the US or Canada, we now know that how everybody thinks about concussions different. There's laws in all 50 states saying that you can't, go back into the game until you're cleared by a doctor. Kids aren't put back in harm's way without being questioned, without a serious stink being raised. So I think we've completely changed the culture around concussions, and that is something we're very proud of, because that was sort of goal number one, because at the beginning we didn't know how big CT was, and it was about concussions. But what's left is there's still so much to do with concussions, because each year is a new crop of young people who don't understand what's actually behind their skull, right? And so we need to teach them about it. And we don't do a good job with kids. And that's one of the reasons why we have the program Team Up, Speak Up, which you had scrolling below, which is an education program which is really designed to help change the culture and the conversation within teams. Because we now provide sort of standard to have some education in every sport. But it's usually like a one-pager or somebody saying, hey, if you get concussions, you need to come out. But we don't talk about why. We don't talk about what it means. Team Up Speak Up is all about the fact that we don't do a good job diagnosing concussions still to this day. as we were just talking about, that 30-second dizziness, does that count? But the people who always know when someone's hurt are their teammates. And we don't ask teammates to raise their hand and speak up if they're worried about a teammate having a concussion. And Tio speaking was about having the coach and the team leader, the captains, talk about how on their team the culture is, if you think your teammate has concussion, you need to speak up and tell somebody, because if you don't and they keep playing, really bad things can happen, including the end of their career or worse.
Listen, as I let you go, I can't thank you enough about your time. Team Up, Speak Up is such an important process, and I've lived it. I've understood this. Obviously, we know the story up here in Canada with Rowan Stringer, but I've been heavily involved with Eric Pelly's passing, the Joan Pelly and her wonderful family, and understanding that he made a pact with one of his teammates not to tell anybody that he had suffered. And of course, we know what the end result is. Team Up, Speak Up to fight concussions is so, so important. So please make sure you all sign up, and we'll be pushing it. I think it starts September. I think it's next week. It's in full action.
It starts on Sunday. Yep.
So, Chris, I can promise you we will be doing all we can. And of course, Jamie Uretsky and Natalie Uretsky, who has been a big part of you. I got to know her and the life-changing situations that both Joan and Jamie have brought to me and allowed me to carry the torch and hopefully make a big difference like you are doing. The one thing that I wanted to ask you as we leave you, the Brett Favre, a lot of people said we've got to get parents to understand this more. And you guys came up with an absolute, for me personally, I know there was a little bit of controversy. People were kind of, I absolutely loved it when that young boy was asking the questions and telling his parents about it. I wanted to show it today, but I thought it would be more important to hear it right from your mouth. How impactful it was to me. What has the response been to the overall populace?
Yeah, I mean, we're thrilled. So, we had our second major PSA we did with Brett Favre supporting our Flag Football Under 14 campaign. And basically the idea that we really shouldn't be hitting kids in the head until their brain has a little bit of a chance to develop. And if there's one thing we could change tomorrow, it's change all the rules of sports. Like hockey's already done it. You don't check until you're 13 now, and it could go even higher. But American football, where you start tackling at 5, is probably the one most obvious case where we're giving, clearly increasing football players' chances of having CT. We're giving kids CT for no upside whatsoever. And so Brett Favre believes the same thing. So he did this PSA where he played an aging child. And he played the adult version of the child, saying, "I wish you would never have let me play youth tackle football. It's not what's important. If your 7-year-old understood what Brett Favre knew, he would say, 'Don't let me play until I'm 14.'" And frankly, this time it was 100% positive. Like we've done these before. We had kids smoking while they played football to talk about some research we did, and that was controversial. That caused some fights, but this time it was sort of 100% positive. I think the country is really shifting on this. We've seen way too many football players struggle. We've now diagnosed, 700 of them with CTE. And I think the question is, what should we change? And the number one answer is shorten careers and start with when their kids and their brains are vulnerable and they don't understand what they're getting into. So we can't thank Brett Favre enough for doing it. We had like 1.5 billion impressions, and every show, just like the Today Show, just ended with, "Wow, that was powerful." And that was the point. Like, we're doing all the science, but until we make it emotional, people aren't going to change their behavior. And if I can give you one piece of advice, don't hit your kid in the head, and don't let anybody else hit your kid in the head too, at least until they're in high school, and maybe longer.
Wow. We've been so honored and so blessed to have your time. I know you have to get back, obviously, to the little one. So, yeah. Dr. Chris.
2 little ones. I have 2 little ones now.
The younger one should be asleep right now, so let's be honest.
Yeah.
But Dr. Chris Nowinski, thank you for not only what you're doing today, but what you've done in the past to bring this to the forefront. It's so needed, and certainly honored to call you a friend. Thank you, Chris.
Great to see you, buddy. Appreciate it. Talk soon.
Thank you, buddy. Wow, concussed, understanding the visible injury. That was amazing to have Chris on. Obviously, we mentioned that he graduated from Harvard with a Bachelor Arts degree, and now he's a doctor with a PhD. You must understand through his playing career and certainly through his acting career, when you talk about wrestling, he certainly has come a long way to make sure that we understand the importance of the facts. Parents, please take up the call to make sure you understand this injury, because this injury can certainly change lives in an instant. And we've heard that not only with Jordan, our producer, who's come on. We'll be talking to guys like Paul Rosen, one of our ambassadors. You'll know his story. Of course, Keith Primo, Madeline Uretsky. We will be having her come on very soon. And of course, my dear friend, Joan Pelly. The loss of her son, Eric Pelly, is always etched in our minds, and we will continue on the fight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking time to watch us tonight. Chris Nowinski was certainly amazing. You can go and check him out on the websites. You can obviously come on to Stop Concussions. We are a big proponent of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, brought to you by the great people at the Fired Up Network. Good night, and we'll see you next week. We have a very special guest coming.